That I come from was about 3 years ago, I wanted to know why men didn't want to get married anymore. I kept hearing men say, I don't want to get married. And it kind of took me down the rabbit hole of family court. I started interviewing men that had been what's called divorce raped. And I kept finding guy after guy after guy that lived a couple miles from his kids and could not see them. It goes back to men should have access to their children. It's 50% their DNA. They should get 50% custody off the bat. And right now, 90% of the time, women get custody. The question was, do men have all of their rights? How can I say that they have all of their rights when I'm finding guy after guy after guy that is devastated he can't talk to his children? I had one guy who the woman got custody, and she ended up taking the kid to a different country, and now his kid doesn't speak his same language. He spent $300,000 trying to get that kid back.
I want to look at women's stories as to why they don't want to get married. And I could go interview 1,000 women. You're looking for these kinds of men.
What she is discussing are individual and yes, tragic cases, and we can acknowledge that, but what we're discussing is a systemic issue. On aggregate, men and women after divorce, women see a 27% decline in the reduction of their income. They're more likely to be in poverty, and they're less likely to get remarried.
If you go around the world, there are countries that have male-only conscription, countries that have higher pension ages for men. Countries like the US and Canada have certain welfare programs that men are excluded from, domestic violence laws, homeless laws. There are many cases where men do not have access to the same public welfare programs, tax-paid programs. And if you look at something like the draft in the US, people say, well, that's outdated, it doesn't happen anymore. But many countries in the world, included some that are considered like very first world progressive feminist countries, Austria, Finland, Switzerland, they have male-only conscription, and many countries have higher pension ages for men. So there are many examples of countries that have laws that directly discriminate against men. So do we have all the rights? I mean, no, we don't. In the US, I had to volunteer.
I have a few thoughts. I think one thing that happens oftentimes when we hear words like feminism and patriarchy is that people's brains just turn off. But like there's certain words that have gotten so polarized and so like part of this national debate that we're having that it's like using them almost immediately just makes the conversation pointless because people's guard goes up in one way or the other way, right? But I think one thing that I would like to point out is that there's a difference between white feminism and anti-colonialist feminism. And I think that that's important to realize. And I also think that it's important to realize that this is a colonialist idea, that there are these, emotions that men are not allowed to feel, and that there are ways that men are not allowed to act. And I think that's something that hurts men and it damages the relationship that they have with their children and their maybe female partners or friends or whatever. So I think a lot of this comes down to like it's men versus women. I don't think that's true. And also to their point about custody and high rates of fatherlessness or suicide, right? Like those things are things that matter. And I think they are, discussions that need to be had on a national level. The problem is that people bring them up in response to something else. It's like, don't do that. Talk about it by itself, right? Like we should have discussions about custody that are just discussions about custody, because we all know that like if you tell somebody they did something that bothered you and they immediately come back with something you did that bothered them, like, yeah, that's valid. It's okay. And we should talk about that. But when you say it in response to, women feeling some kind of way, that feels, again, like it shuts the conversation down before it had to be shut down.
I don't think rights exist. I think people have privileges because like the Second Amendment, right? It's supposed to be a right. If you can't walk down the street, well, let me rephrase that. I don't think rights exist because people can take them away from you at any time, and they can violate them and do whatever they want at any time. And the only thing that actually exists is power and weakness. And the people in power can exercise anything they want on anybody that's weak, and they do it. I mean, our rights so-called rights or privileges is afforded through militarization and weapons. You remove that, you remove those rights. So I think the only people that actually have rights are the people in control of guns. So as long as we don't got access to the same type of guns that they got access to, we really don't have no rights. They extending a privilege off the arm, like, yeah, to keep y'all under control. We'll say you got XYZ rights. We don't got none of that shit though. Honestly, they could suspend that shit and send your ass to Guantanamo Bay. We had a place in Chicago called the Black Site, where the police was pulling up on people. You're supposed to have a right from illegal search and seizure, and a right from, you know what I'm saying, being kidnapped, and a right to be documented. They would just pick people off the street, beating them and making them hold them 2 or 3 days, making them confess to crimes, and then locking their ass up, which take away the so-called voting rights. Like, we don't got no damn rights. We got privileges that we can utilize from time to time, that we kind of bank our head on. But if you can't back somebody down and make and enforce the right, it ain't no real right. It don't really exist. It's a social construct of an idea to have a better society. But as long as you're not the one in power, you don't got no right.
The volunteer, I wasn't given a choice, but I had to register for the draft. So that's a small example, but it's, you know, one that still goes on today.
Going back to the family court thing, because we want to talk about traditional relationships, and that's how it should be. The mom should stay home with the kids, and the dad is the provider and all that. But then when it comes to the family court, we want to be like, oh, dads need 50% custody, but you don't even know your kid. You've been off providing all this time, and the only reason now you want 50% custody is because that's the only thing that still connects you to the woman, or whatever up reason you have. But it has nothing to do with the children at heart. It has to do with, I'm their father, I deserve 50% custody. But where were you the first 10, 15 years that we were raising the kids?
I'm not denying that they need their mothers or their fathers more. Men and women complement each other. That is what I'm saying. Some men are more masculine, some women are more feminine. My girlfriend's more feminine, I'm more masculine. We go very well together because our values align.
What is feminine?
But hold on. What is feminine to me? She wants to take care of children. She wants to stay.
So that's feminine.
To me, it is. To me, it is. That is what I want in a woman. You can only speak from, I can name you the stats, but I'm talking about me. I'm talking as a person.
Name the stats.
So what about the stats where all the fathers who leave and don't pay child support? Isn't that far more common than these men who are on
or the men who do get the rights? Because they're fighting for custody,
which they only do 50% less than women do. When men want primary custody, they only file the appropriate paperwork 40% of the time. Women do it over 80% of the time. And then they complain that they're not courts don't give you something that you're not asking for. Period.
So what are you saying?
Men choose not to support their families. They waive responsibility.
Far more
many times.
That's very sexist to say that. To assume that fathers don't care about their kids.
No, then why aren't they actively fighting for their kids?
They are. It wouldn't be an issue if it didn't happen. It's an issue for a reason. There are lawyers that specialize in this. They wouldn't have a business if it didn't happen.
I know, at least for you.
I think that the as far as the legal system, it is definitely set up. Family court is definitely set up as it's in favor of the woman off top. I've sat on panels, I've done things, because like I stated before, I think that, blood tests should be mandatory. No one should be paying child support for a child if it's not proven that it's theirs. I don't even know how that fell through the cracks. Like, I don't know why we're fighting for that one. So just having brothers and cousins and seeing the things that they've had to go through with the court system, as far as it pertains to their, like everybody knows, like the woman is automatically the custodial parent. Like, it's just like an automatic thing. Like when you go through a divorce, it's kind of like you gotta change things in the petition to say, like, we want it to be together. We want joint custody. That's not an automatic thing. Automatically, the woman is the custodial parent. Even when you're talking about people that are on government assistance, the woman is automatically the custodial parent. There is no man available.
Is that state of Illinois? Is that state of Illinois where you don't automatically get joint custody upon divorce?
That was I did mine in Texas.
I just had a divorce 2.5 years ago, and they default to 50-50 unless you ask for it to be different.
Okay, yeah, because I know over here in Georgia, you get a divorce, it's 50-50 by default.
Well, in Texas, it was just we had to literally put it in that we wanted, for both of us. It was joint, 50-50 at the time. There was no custodial parent because it automatically defaulted to me. But Texas is a whole different country in their own entity. So,
Does anybody know any
but I
states?
did notice.
No, go ahead. I didn't know you was finished. Go ahead.
So the next thing that I wanted to say, I was piggybacking off of what M. White said. But the thing about it is the men, they don't want to create these laws, and they put these laws into place because they are the ones that are empowered. So it's always confusing to me when they're like, now they're like men don't have rights. I don't think that it's a right issue either, because the men are the ones who created the laws and put them into place to begin with. So obviously that's how they felt. The men felt like the women should have custody. The men in power felt like everything should default that way. So I feel like it starts with them. So, I feel like it's kind of like a two-way street. Like you can't have your cake and eat it too. Because somebody put those laws into place, somebody built those systems, and it wasn't women. So I feel like the plight that y'all try to make it like women did this, you guys are doing this to us. Women, we didn't go down there and do any of those things.
Actually,
Like that was already set up like that. So I think it's a system.
actually, women did go down there and petition for these type of laws, and the reason why they were put into place was because there was an overcorrection for a minority of women. They overcorrected by doing, default custody and things like that to kind of correct an issue that women typically had complained about, which was some women were complaining about the fathers walking out on their children. So they went to and petitioned the courts and petitioned the government for laws to be put into place that will hold those men accountable. The problem is that there was an overcorrection. And also the laws kind of fit the time at that period of time where women primarily were at home. Women primarily did not have jobs like that. So it was kind of customary for the man to maintain the pay child support and things like that while the woman stayed and took care of the kids. However, that doesn't mean that the problem is that times have been modernized, things have been updated, but we're still going by the same archaic laws. That's the issue that men are fighting against, is changing the laws to be more in alignment with what the current times. The issue is that the problem is that a man shouldn't have to fight for his kids to begin with. That's the protection that men are asking for, is to say, look, she can't go and just strip me of my rights. She can't go where I shouldn't have to go to court to have access to my kids. It should already be my right, just like it's her right for the most part. And then if somebody act a fool, then we can talk about court. That's not the problem that's happening. The problem is that things are being defaulted to the woman, or she takes off with the kids, which typically is what happened. A woman would leave and then she would take her kids with her, because let's keep it a bean. If any of y'all decided to leave your man, he said, over my dead body, you ain't taking my kids with you, y'all will fight tooth and nail to make sure those kids go with you. And 9 times out of 10, when the police show up, they're going to tell him that if it gets out of hand, they're going to either haul him off to jail or protect you in a way where you get to walk away, even with those kids in tow. It won't be where they tell you, the police will show up and say, hey, Aisha, I know you saying that you want to leave, but this is the kid's primary residence, and you cannot leave. You cannot take those kids with you outside the house from their father. That's not what police typically do. They allow you to leave. They allow you to take the children with you. And then once you have the kids with you, you're defaulted to primary custody until y'all go to court. And at that point, now he's fighting you for custody, because court system shouldn't have to exist as long as both parents agree that I get the kids this amount of time, you get the kids that amount of time. The court kicks in because people don't agree. There's always, anytime you hear a situation where there's a fight, is because somebody is denying somebody something. A woman who has to fight for child support is because the father is denying her the right, denying her money. A father that has to fight for the right to see his kids is because a woman is denying him the right to his kids. If a woman comes up and says, you know what, I understand, we not together anymore, I'm cool with you having the kids 50% of the time, we'll figure out the child support situation, but because we both have them at the same time, it doesn't really matter. I take care of them when they're in my possession, you take care of them when you're in their possession. That's not what happens. If that was the case, most people wouldn't fight. Most people wouldn't even take it to court. What happens is father says, I want the child half the time. Mother says no. Father, and she may say no for a number of reasons. She may say no because you don't pay me enough money. She may say no because she don't like the people you're around. She may say no because she don't like your mama. It doesn't matter. She says no. Now you have to go to court and fight her just to see your own kids. You have to pay for lawyers. You have to pay for this. You have to pay for that. And all she has to do is sit back and say no. So the issue isn't necessarily, it is a rights issue because by default, that's what they're fighting for. My automatic right to be a parent. I'm entitled to be my child's parent and have my child in my life just as much as the person I co-parent with. I have just as much of a right. And it should be by default. Another thing that they're fighting for is mandatory DNA testing. First and foremost, DNA testing tend to be mandatory when somebody goes for child support. For the most part, in a lot of states. I mean, most states that I've been a part of, they require it. But what a lot of things, what happens in a plenty of states is once a man signs a birth certificate and an acknowledgement of paternity, he can't then double back and find out that the child isn't his. So what men are asking for is saying, hey, why don't we cut the middleman out so that I don't have to fight with my wife? Because what will happen is they will say, well, why don't you just go and get the DNA test? Why don't you just do that? Well, that tends to cause problems in relationships when a man asks for a DNA test from a woman that he's with. So what the men are saying is, let's just cut the middleman out and make it required. I don't care if I have to pay for it. I don't care if it's state funded. I don't care how we figure it out. Before the birth certificate and all of that is signed, we supposed to make sure that both of us are parents to that kid. You DNA test the mom and the dad. We know exactly who the parents are, and then we can move forward from there rather than having a situation where men are finding out years, decades later that the child isn't his. That's what men are simply asking for. They're asking for the right to their children and a right to the right to paternity. That's pretty much it, as far as the court system is concerned.
Go ahead, Amir.
I want to add on to what Aisha said, because Aisha said something that's so important, and she said about mandatory DNA testing. But even to Aisha's point, Aisha, there are so many cases where the man is not the father, and the courts force them to still pay child support on bastard children that are not theirs. It is so unfair in this world right now for men. And to what Sweeney says about the fight, I mean, even when they say it's 50-50, it's not true. They don't enforce things 50-50. Like I gave you guys the example of the mother being the crackhead and dropping the kids off in places, and they'll have mandatory checkups, and you have the women strung out on drugs, the children filthy, haven't been cleaned, haven't been educated, haven't been anything. And the next day, you will see the woman get the children again. But let the man show up late to return the children just once during a child exchange, or let the man anything, any minor thing, and they reduce his rights and they reduce his privilege to his children. These things aren't enforced. And when it comes to women's rights, women talking about their right is the right to kill babies, to kill their fetuses. And I don't understand how that is considered a right. If anybody could explain to me how irresponsibility, I understand we always have the example of rape, incest, and so on and so forth. But aside from that, that should be the only thing. Go ahead.
Watch that R word.
Great. Yeah. Aside from that and incest, that should be the only thing that should be excusable for that. But in the majority of cases, we have 95% of women who go to these abortion clinics, and they're just going there because they had a fling. They were irresponsible. What did it say, like 33 or 35 forms of birth control, and women are refusing to use any of them. But I guess it's a right to kill the fetus instead of being responsible. I'm done.
Well, I was gonna say, when I looked into it, pretty much the same reasons why, and I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole because I think we're really still sitting there trying to talk about, I'm guessing men's rights. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but yeah, typically when you see typically for baby deletions, it's nearly almost the same reasons why men abandon their children. It's the same reasons. It's something. It's for money, career, not ready to be a parent, don't like the other parent or the person that they parented with. So it's pretty much the same reasons. But let's not go down that rabbit hole.